Now, so that would get us to segue to a very important incident that happened in 2017. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is it goes back to prove the point that you are a comeback kid. You know. Now, I know that this is going to be unpleasant to you, but I'm going to raise it anyway. Right. Now, in 2017, you wrote a piece in the Straits Times, and it's titled "Big Lessons for a Small Country." And I'd like to read excerpts of it. You said, Qatar ignored an eternal rule of geopolitics. Small states must behave like small states. What's the first thing we should do? Exercise discretion. We should be very restrained in commenting on matters involving great powers. Hence, it would have been wiser to be more circumspect on the judgment of an international tribunal on the arbitration which the Philippines instituted against China concerning the South China Sea dispute, especially since the Philippines, which was involved in the case, did not want to press it. When I hear some of our official representatives say that we would take a consistent and principled stand on geopolitical issues, I am tempted to remind them that consistency and principle are important, but cannot be the only trait that define our diplomacy. And there is a season for everything. The best time to speak up for our principles is not necessarily in the heat of a row between bigger powers. When I was ambassador to the United Nations in 2003, Singapore supported the American invasion of Iraq, even though it was not endorsed by the UN Security Council. As Mr. Kofi Annan said, who was then the Secretary General of the UN, this made it an illegal war. However, we prudently followed our geopolitial interests, not our principles in Iraq war. This is the gist of what you said, right? Now, as you would remember, it received a very rigorous rebuttal from one of your colleagues in MFA, former colleagues, Bilahari Kausikan. And I'd like to read excerpts of his rebuttal. I have no quarrel with what Kishore has to say about regionalism and the UN. But his first lesson, that small states must always behave like small states, is muddled, mendacious, and indeed dangerous. Kishore once never tired of saying that we must punch above our weight. He obviously has changed his mind. Kishore says Mr. Lee Kuan Yew never behaved as the leader of a small country and earned the right to state his views because he was respected by the major powers. True, but how did he earn that right? Mr. Lee and his comrades did not earn respect by being meekly compliant to the major powers. They were not reckless, but they did not hesitate to stand up for their ideals and principles when they had to. They did not earn the respect of the major powers, and Singapore did not survive and prosper by being anybody's tame poodle. In 2010, then PRC, China's Foreign Minister Yang Jiechi, at an ASEAN meeting was reported to have publicly and pointedly reminded ASEAN that China was a big country, staring at then Foreign Minister George Yeo. Mr. Yeo reportedly stared back. I am profoundly disappointed that Kishore should advocate subordination as a norm of Singapore foreign policy. It made me ashamed. I know you chose at that point in time, in 27, not to respond because it would have escalated the matter and turned ugly or uglier. But this is an opportunity for you to respond to it. Perhaps not to Bilahari per se, but respond to the situation and perhaps shed some light on your motivation for writing that article.
Well, why don't I tie it to the writing of the book? Because since you mentioned Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, one of the reasons why I wrote this book is that many Singaporeans, especially the young Singaporeans, don't understand how incredibly brilliant, shrewd, and wily the three founding fathers of Singapore were, especially Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and Rajaratnam. And what I try to do in my memoirs is to tell stories that describe how brilliant they were. In fact, I often claim that one reason why Singapore has been an exceptionally successful state is that our founding fathers may have been as brilliant, if not more brilliant, than the founding fathers of the United States of America. And one of the great privileges of my life is that I got to spend a lot of time with them. You mentioned the Iraq War. I can tell you, when I happened to come back to Singapore for some reason,
when I was
ambassador to UN in New York. I was in New York from 1998 to 2004 in the build-up to the Iraq War. And I remember I was invited to meet Mr. Lee Kuan Yew about a month or two or so, a few months before the war. And sure enough, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew asked the inevitable question, so do you think the United States is going to invade Iraq? And I said, I'm really sorry to inform you that they are going to invade Iraq. And I can tell you he gave a very deep sigh. Sort of, he knew so well that this would be a disaster, but he could do nothing to stop it. So, the Lee Kuan Yew's capacity to understand geopolitical issues is just amazing, off the charts. And you could see that this disaster was coming with the invasion. And in the case of Rajaratnam, I give you another example. This is an example of prudence. Again,
sorry, before you do that, what was the position adopted by Singapore? Exactly. Why did we adopt the position we?
Well, I think it was very clear that our leaders calculated that our good relations with the United States were the most important thing.
Of strategic interest to us.
Strategic interest of Singapore, and so if we had to go along with the U.S., we will go along with it, which by the way is a rational thing to do, not necessarily irrational. But I was going to give you an example of prudence. This also happened when I was ambassador to the UN, and this happened my first tour of duty, I think 84 to 89, and at that time, as you know, the Prime Minister of Malaysia was Mahathir. And Mahathir decided, Mahathir, as you know, is a remarkable personality.
Yeah.
He's prepared to do brave things, as they say. So he decided that the claims made by all the Western powers on Antarctica was so unfair. Why should the richest countries seize all the wealth of Antarctica? Why couldn't the poor countries like Malaysia? And frankly, Mahathir was right. Why should the wealthy countries take all the resources of Antarctica? Antarctica should be a common heritage of humanity. And so I thought this is a great idea. So I wrote a note to MFA as Ambassador UN. Hey, we should support Dr. Mahathir against these wealthy countries who are trying to seize the resources of Antarctica.
How old were you then?
I was very young, in my 30s then. But obviously Rajaratnam was much wiser than me. He saw this. Obviously Mahathir is going to fight the Westerners. He saw no reason why even if it's the right thing to do, why should Singapore unnecessarily alienate these Western countries? So he said no, and he gave me very strict, categorical instructions. Amazingly, because Rajaratnam was a very nice, flexible guy. But when it came to this issue, he was very, very clear.
Non-negotiable.
He basically said, Kishore, you should not open your mouth on Antarctica, basically. So I kept my mouth shut. Even though I thought what Mahathir was doing the right thing. So, that's prudence, you know. So this is where I think our leaders, Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and Rajaratnam, were amazing geopolitical masters. And frankly, I believe that that I could not have written 10 books if I hadn't sat at the feet of these three masters and learned from them it's an art, it's not a science, it's an art. Okay? This is not like Newton's law or whatever it is. This is an art. An art for understanding how geopolitics works, how complex it is. The interplay of history, economics, leaders, all coming together, and then you get to see the whole big picture.
It's not a clear-cut binary issue.
Yeah, and it's very, very, very complex. And basically, I learned from Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and Rajaratnam the art of mastering complexity, and try to explain the complexity in ways that could reach out to everybody. So, my book was in one way, in a personal level, a tribute to my mother, because I really think without her I wouldn't have succeeded. But at the same time, my book, I also hope, is a tribute to Lee Kuan Yew, Goh Keng Swee, and Rajaratnam, because looking back now, I'm amazed at how much I learned from them.
Was that the point broadly that you were trying to make in your 2017 article?
Well, I think it's very clear. I think looking back now, especially when listening to the way you read it, I've forgotten. I think if I had been smarter, I would have phrased everything a bit more diplomatically. So I failed in diplomacy.
How would you have phrased it differently? Just out of curiosity.
Actually one thing I didn't do, which some of my friends told me. I know I have many good friends, and some of them said to me, Kishore, you should have sent me the article for vetting, and I would have helped you, put it in and that was a mistake I made. I wrote it unfortunately, I wrote that article in a hurry and sent it off in a hurry. And looking back now, I realize it's prudent when you write an article out, always let it sit for a while and then come back to it. That's what I should have done.
It's gracious of you.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。